Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting us here today. As they said, my name is Jennifer Clark. I'm the Voting Assistance Officer at the US Consulate General, Hong Kong and Macau. The US Consulate is here to help facilitate voting for US citizens living overseas by answering your voting questions and also by accepting ballots for mailing back to the US. We recommend that you register to vote and request your ballot by August 1st. So that date has passed. Therefore, if you have not done so, please do so now. You can register to vote and request your ballot in one easy step by filling out the Federal Postcard Application, or FPCA, at FVAP.gov. That's FVAP.gov. And we'll provide these links later as well. Using the FPCA ensures that your state will send your ballot to you at least 45 days before the election. That's their promise. Many states allow you to submit the FPCA and deliver your ballot to you electronically. So investigate those options. That's the best choice. In terms of ballot submission, once you've completed your ballot, many states also provide fax and email options. In order to review your state's latest submission guidelines, you can find them at FVAP.gov. Specifically, they have a section of the site, www.vap.gov/COVID-19, where you can find a handy map where you can investigate your state's submission guidelines. And we'll also provide that link in our links that we send after this call. US citizens that need to mail in their ballots because of their state submission guidelines can bring them to the US Consulate. You can specifically bring them up to the American Citizen Services Unit, where Vincent works, to submit your ballot. That's located at 26 Garden Road in Central, and you can do so Tuesdays or Thursdays between 2 to 4 p.m., except for public holidays. We have information about our security and entrance procedures on our website, hk.usconsulate.gov, and the link to that will also be provided to you. How to prepare your ballot when you bring it to the consulate. To prepare it, make sure it's in a postage paid return envelope or has sufficient domestic US postage on the envelope. And it also needs to be addressed to the relevant local election officials. You can access a template for the postage prepaid envelope at FVAP.gov as well. If you do not have your ballot by October 3rd, you can access the FWAB or the Federal Write-in Absentee ballot at FVAP.gov as well. The recommended vote by date for the general election is October 13th. Therefore, if you're outside the US. Therefore, if you haven't received your state's ballot by October 3rd, we recommend you start investigating using the FWAB. There are copies online, as I said, and we also have copies at the US Consulate as well. But the FWAB is a backup ballot that filling out the FPCA, and sorry, there are a lot of acronyms, that filling out the FPCA allows you to access if you have not received your state's ballot 30 days before the election. You can always contact us, as I said, if you have any voting questions at ACSHK@state.gov. Alternatively, we can be reached by telephone at 2841-2211. And we'll provide this contact information in a subsequent email as well. Now I think we're ready if you have any additional voting questions to take any and all questions.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, Vincent, and Brendan, for those comments. I'm not sure exactly how we can handle these questions. Well, I think you can type them in under chat or unmute and speak. So Ryan, can you help with that at AmCham?
Hi, everyone. Hi, John. It's Tara Joseph from
Tara,
AmCham. How are you?
Hi,
yes. Good morning.
No.
And thanks to the consulate and everyone for this really useful information. I see there's a bunch of questions coming through by chat. So I'm happy to read them out. And I hope that all of you who are on Zoom also have access to them. The first one is I use this site to request my absentee ballot. Is this a legitimate site? And it's called www.votefromabroad.org. So the question to the consulate folks is that a legitimate site to register on and get an absentee ballot?
I can take that question. That's actually the site for Democrats Abroad, a legitimate organization that exists. Therefore, you shouldn't have problems requesting ballots from that site. I believe they also link to the FPCA, but no, you don't have to be worried that that isn't associated with a legitimate organization. That's the Democrats Abroad based site.
Okay, thank you. Someone else asked, could we receive written information of websites of what we just discussed? And I think you've already made that clear that for sure you will send that through to AmCham. And I know there's a bunch of folks from the American Club on this call as well. We'll make sure to circulate it to everyone on this call so that you all get it. Some more questions. My wife is a US citizen, but has never lived in the USA, so has never registered in any state. How does she register to vote?
That's a great question. I'll just talk about residency in general. It may answer some questions other people have. Your voting residency is the state where you were last domiciled immediately prior to leaving the US. So that could be a state where you no longer own property, you no longer have any ties, and even if you no longer intend to ever return to the US, that would be your residency. If you've never lived in the US, it depends on your state. If you go to FVAP.gov, there's a web link or a web page on that site that explains that depending on the state, you may still be able to vote based on where your parents resided. For example, if you're born overseas, or if you've never lived in the US. So I would recommend you go to FVAP.gov and you can type into the search bar residency, and they'll have a page where, depending on your state, if your parents live there, you may qualify and be able to register to vote, etc. So that's something a lot of people don't know, which is a great question. You don't necessarily have to have lived in the US before to be able to register for a particular state of residency and vote.
Great, thank you. And the questions are pouring in. I hope I can get to all of them. I requested an absentee ballot online last week and asked for it to be emailed to me. On average, how long does it take the states to get out absentee ballots via email?
So that will depend on the state, the particular electoral office. However, if they do send via email, that's a good sign that it should come quickly. I would recommend checking your junk folder in case it ends up inside. That's something that may happen with these routine emailings. But the FPCA guarantee is that you should have your ballot 45 days ahead of Election Day. Many electoral websites as well, they have an option where you can search by your name and just ensure that you are registered to receive that ballot. I know Virginia does. I'm registered in Virginia, and I recently just checked the website. Yes, I am signed up to receive the general election ballot this year. A lot of those websites also register or have indication of whether or not your vote was registered after you've submitted your ballot. So you can check that online. But as I said, if you have the option where your state is sending you your ballot electronically by email, that's the best option, and you should receive that before the election day.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a general question based around the stuff that's coming in on the chat site, because I think overall it's a question about where am I considered to be domiciled as far as the US goes. And you brought this up earlier. The last place that you lived, right? It doesn't matter whether you owned property there, still, etc. And is that just based around an honor code of that's the last place I lived where you register? For example, the last city I lived in was New York City. I have nothing, I only lived there for a year before I left the States many years ago. But do I just based around the honor code of that's where I live, that's where I register? A lot of people are asking these types of questions on the chat.
Yes, that is correct. It is an honor code, and you actually affirm that when you fill out your FPCA. There's a number of affirmations you make or boxes you check, such as I will be over the age of 18 by election day. Another one is I have not registered in any other state. So it is what you consider your domicile. You don't necessarily have to have owned property there. You could have lived there. You could have just gone to school there, gone to university for 4 years in that particular state, and use that state as your state of residency. It really is the honor code that you don't register for more than one state. And you affirm that when you sign the FPCA.
Okay, but what if you registered in another state previously? Does that matter? Do people move states and thus when they vote, change to another state?
So this does matter for a couple of different reasons. In terms of changing state to state, one reason we recommend you fill out the FPCA every calendar year is often for this reason, states will eliminate their voter rolls every year. Some states, I heard New York does it every 4 years, but they do this to clean out people who are no longer living there, maybe no longer considering that their domicile, maybe people have passed. For various reasons, they clean out the rolls, and therefore it is a recommendation to sign up for the FPCA every calendar year. In terms of changing state to state, there are also additional implications. For example, tax implications. Therefore, if you do change your voting residency from state to state, I do recommend you consult legal counsel to see if you will have any additional tax liabilities based on changing your state of residency for voting purposes.
Thank you. So here's another question that I think is a general concern. Given that overseas mail is delayed these days, how do we ensure that our ballots can arrive in Hong Kong on time if there's no online option available? And also, how can we ensure they get to the US in time to be counted in the election?
Thank you for that question. That is on the minds of a lot of people right now because of what we've been hearing in the news and what we know about delays as far as mail and postage. In terms of receiving your ballot, I believe every state, for the most part, is sending them electronically. I would check that website, FVAP.gov, for the latest information. A lot of changes have happened during COVID this year because of the difficulties of sending things through mail, and general electoral offices have very different procedures this year than maybe they have had in the past. So please investigate that. But the vast majority, at least, are sending ballots in via email and electronically. In terms of submission, that's where we come in. If your state requires a physical ballot to be mailed to you, that's something that we can do on your behalf. What you would do is bring your ballot signed and sealed to the US Consulate Tuesdays or Thursdays from 2 to 4 p.m. We will take it, we will postmark it the same day that we receive it, the same day you brought it to the US Consulate, and then we'll put it in the mail. It takes right now about a week to get to the US, to hit USPS. But then after that, it has to get to your local electoral office. So we still urge people to submit your ballot as soon as you receive it. Don't wait. decide what you're going to vote for before you receive it, fill it out, and then bring it to the US Consulate, and we'll be happy to send it to the US on your behalf.
Thank you. This is another question that other people may be thinking about, is that it on some people's voting documents, it says it asks for party affiliation. Does that need to be filled in?
That also depends on your state. For some primaries, it does, but it depends on the state. Whether you can vote in a Democratic primary, for example, may depend on whether you registered on your ballot and selected that you are a member of the Democratic Party or not. But if you're just voting for the general election, you don't have to fill out one party affiliation or another. You could leave that blank if you decide to do so.
Okay. Another one for abroad citizens that I've seen before and is asked here, as an abroad citizen, will you just vote in the presidential election and not the local office elections?
So that's a good question. You can decide to vote in all your elections if you want to down the ballot. However, there are potential tax implications. So I'll just discuss that briefly. For federal offices, that's the presidency, Congress, you will not incur any additional tax liability. But for state and local elections, governor, anything down to school board members, sheriffs, local sheriffs, there may be additional state and local tax implications for participating in those elections. So I just caution people to be aware of that. And if you decide to vote in your local elections and you don't want to incur additional tax liability, also consult your counsel about that.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. If you vote in local elections, that adds to your tax liability. But if you vote only in the presidential and congressional elections, there's no tax liability attached to that. Is that true for all 50 states?
Yes, for federal offices, you can vote without changing your tax obligations for federal offices.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, how do we access the correct postage and return receipt, etc.? Guess you just go to the post office, right? Or
you can. However, I think the easiest thing to do is to print out the prepaid postage envelope on the FVAP.gov website. Then you don't have to worry about postage at all. You just go online and print it out on an envelope. Or I even actually, when I voted in the primary, printed it out, and then cut it out and taped it onto the outside of an envelope. That is the easiest way to send your information in without having to worry about postage, how much postage costs, and having domestic US postage stamps. Because I know many of us have lived overseas for a while and probably do not have handy US stamps in our house. So we will send that link as well to the prepaid postage envelope so that you can access that.
thank you. Another question is, where can we check whether our state emails ballots?
So there's a nice infographic map on the FVAP.gov website that highlights every state by color and describes whether they accept submissions by fax, mail, or email. And that's a link we'll also send to you so that you can easily check your state and see what their latest submission guidelines are.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Someone else says, I once emailed a question to ASCHK@state.gov, but got a message that it was not a valid email. Is that the correct address for follow-up questions? ASCHK@state.gov.
The correct email address is ACSHK. So American Citizen Services, ACSHK at state.gov.
So sorry for that person, you just got your two letters mixed up. Try it again and you'll get there. Another question, on the ballot request from FVAP, it asks for a driver's license or state ID. If you've never lived in the United States and don't have a driver's license, what should you do?
So they explain on the FVAP.gov website, you do not have to present identification when you fill out the form. So if you do not have an ID, don't worry about that. That's optional. If you want to put in an ID to help with identification, if you have a driver's license in the US, you could go ahead and do so, but you don't have to do so to register to vote to submit the FPCA.
Okay. Now about registering to vote. Someone asks, I've not registered to vote. Can we register through AmCham, the US Consulate, or do we need to register directly with the state? I can say that you can't do it through AmCham, but I'll pass it on to the consulate as to whether people can register with you.
You can also not register to vote through us. What you can do though is go to FVAP.gov and register to vote by filling out the federal postcard application. If you do come to the US Consulate, we will just give you the federal postcard application to use to register to vote. That is the easiest way to register and request your ballots at the same time. As I say, we encourage you to do that every year to be safe. If for some reason you're already registered in that state, it will just request the ballots for you. It won't double register you or cause an error in the system or anything like that. So fill out the FWCA federal postcard application, and they will send you every eligible ballot or every ballot you are eligible for the calendar year, which is great. You can fill in and submit the ones you want to use and to vote, and you can leave the ones you do not want to submit.
Okay. People are asking whether they can get their ballot at the US Consulate since they haven't received it via email.
So as I said, we do have federal write-in absentee ballots. If for some reason you haven't received your state's ballot by 30 days before the election, by October 3rd, I recommend if you are receiving or slotted to receive your ballot by email that you check your junk mail folder because it ends up in there. You know, they're sent, you know, through a system where it makes it likely they'll end up in junk mail folder, and I found mine before in the junk mail folder. So please check that before anything if you want your state's ballot. If you haven't received it, you can access the federal write-in absentee ballot at FVAP.gov, print it out in the comfort of your own home, fill it out, and bring it to the consulate for mailing back to the US in a signed, sealed, postage prepaid envelope. If for some reason you can't locate it online, you can always come to the US Consulate. We do have federal write-in absentee ballots as well. But it is important to get your vote in because we know there are potential delays in the mail domestically. So go ahead, if you haven't received your ballot by October 3rd, and consider filling out the federal write-in absentee ballot to make sure your vote's counted.
Okay, thank you. So just to confirm, I know you brought it up at the beginning. So for American citizens who want to register to vote or want more information about their own personal voting situation, and as consulate folks, I guess you realize there's so many different types of people from different states with different issues, having lived abroad for a while. Do we need to make an appointment to come in and see you personally, or would it be better to call or email you?
Hey Tara, this is Brendan. I
Hi.
mean, really, you can do any of those things. You don't need to make an appointment. My colleagues can jump in if they disagree. I would suggest email. It's the email ACSHK@state.gov. It's not a black hole. We have a lot of people devoted to answering that stuff on a daily basis. We turn those email replies around fairly quickly. So that would be recommendation. We also have some walk-in hours, which Vincent or Jen can list out what those are. But email always works well.
Okay. And so people do not need to make an appointment to register or drop off a ballot at the consulate. Is that correct?
That's right. Jen, do you want to explain the hours?
Yes, so you do not need to make an appointment. You can drop off your ballot Tuesdays or Thursday, 2 to 4 p.m. So any Tuesday or Thursday, 2 to 4 p.m., unless it's a public holiday. And I would just recommend before coming to the consulate, make sure you have your ID, make sure you review our security procedures on our website, because there are certain things you can't bring inside the consulate. Don't come with a laptop, for example, just to make things easier on yourself. But like I said, you can come in, drop off your ballot, and it takes maybe 10 to 20 minutes just to come in the afternoon and drop it off. And we'll postmark it that day. So some people are concerned about their ballots, their envelopes needing to be postmarked. Be assured everything we receive is postmarked the day we receive it before it goes out into the mail.
Thank you. Now, I know in past years, COVID year not being a normal one, as we all know, I've seen desks at the American Club in Town Club, for example, where you're there to answer questions, or I don't know whether people can actually register to vote. If the COVID situation improves in the next few weeks, is it possible to set up a desk either at AmCham or at the club?
Yeah, Tara, that's a really good question. You're exactly right. Typically, we would be doing more of these in-person events. We're doing obviously more virtually at this point. If the COVID situation improves and we can do it safely and everybody's in agreement that we can set up proper social distancing, we're more than willing to do it. It's just right now at this time, we're just not quite there yet. Just to give you a sense, at the consulate, well, we're split up into two teams at this point. So we're kind of going into the office halftime on this two-team schedule. So we're pretty limited in terms of, staff on site. But yes, we hope we have an opportunity to do some events. Obviously, time is getting a little short, and it will just really depend on how the COVID situation unfolds in Hong Kong in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Well, I'll keep in close touch with you on that, because it sounds like people do really have a lot of questions and would like to meet face to face. Somehow that helps the situation. I think we'll leave it from there. There's a lot of individual questions, and it seems like people just need to contact you. So if you would kindly send us those website details and information, I'll make sure it gets out to everyone on the call. We really appreciate all the time and effort you're putting in during this very difficult year. And thank you very much for the time. I'll pass it back to Jon Zinke, who is hosting the call, just to finish it off. Jon, back to you.
No, thank you, Tara. Thanks for stepping in and handling the questions too. And a great job. And I just want to thank everybody from the consulate, Brendan, Vincent, and Jennifer for taking the time to tell us all they know about voting. It's been very helpful. I think a lot of people have learned a lot about how to vote. I certainly have. And just thank you very much from AmCham. And thank you all for participating.
Yeah, thank you, Jon and Tara. We really appreciate the opportunity. The vote's coming up pretty quick. So please don't hesitate to take action now so that you can make sure your vote's counted.
Thanks.
Right.
Have a great day, everybody. At least the sun's out.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.